Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine Ball and this is A Touch of Flourish. If you're not aware, for the month of October, I'm going to be talking about pregnancy loss and how that affects us spiritually. So on TikTok, I've been sharing spiritual lies and truths that we experience and may begin to believe as we grieve after miscarriage, stillbirth, pregnancy loss in general. This is week 2. So I've posted a whole week of TikToks. I've shared them on the blog. I've also, you can just go straight to TikTok and look at them there. But they're also on Instagram. So I'm trying to give you guys options of what you prefer to use as far as platforms. I do think that the blog and here are going to be better places because I'm going to cover things that are not in the videos here and share things just from my perspective. And I really want that feedback from you guys of what was your perspective from this? How have you gone spiritually? Like, what have you gone through and how have you been able to come out of it? What revelations did you receive? All right, so this is week 2 and I have shared TikToks this past week covering a myriad of topics that we can kind of fall into with grief. I mean, obviously we're going to experience anger at some point and that's going to look different for everybody. We're also going to kind of question certain things about God. It's just inevitable. It doesn't mean that you have a lack of faith in and of itself if you're just kind of like, hold on, I don't understand. But sometimes we can have unbeliefs that are uncovered. You know, I do want to talk about anger, but also the negative emotions in general, because I think that for whatever reason in Christianity, I think we kind of get told, or maybe we just have internalized this, that we're not supposed to feel negative emotions, that we should just be grateful for, you know, each and every day that we have breath in our lungs and all of that stuff. And I just don't think that that's really realistic. So we're going to definitely talk about that here. I did cover this past week just a little bit about trying to conceive and, you know, not rushing that process, especially after pregnancy loss, because, you know, there's just so much happening when we lose a baby and we can kind of think, oh, let's rush and hurry up and do this. And I really want to talk about that because I experienced a little bit of that and I was glad that I waited. Now we all have a different grief process and that time is different for each of us. And so some people might really just truly be ready and others may not be. So it's not about judgment so much as just like, hey, let's talk about this. I also want to hear from you. I mean, you know, if you experienced pregnancy loss, you know, miscarriage, stillbirth, and maybe you had recurrent losses, or maybe you had one, or maybe you have living children and then you have had pregnancy loss too. I want to hear from you guys, like, how have you gone through that? So that's a little bit about what I want to talk about today. I do want to go ahead and comment that we are in the garden house, okay? I have neglected these plants and I feel terrible. And actually, like, I'm trying to not let this fern get in the way, but it's like, hello. So sorry. Yes, and we will go through, I'd love for you guys to see all of the garden house at some other point, but just know that, you know, I don't think that every single video has to be formal or whatever. And so that's just, it's honestly just kind of boring to me. So I also really just didn't want to get all dressed up. So I hope that's not a problem. But let's get right into it. So one of the biggest things that I want to talk about is anger after miscarriage and stillbirth. And, you know, everybody experiences anger, just a part of grief, but it can look different. So it's not always this obvious rage or, you know, that sort of thing. Sometimes it's very subtle and it could just be that maybe you just get extra irritated and you're just irritable and, you know, you get irritated easily. I mean, that is actually a form of anger that I think a lot of people don't realize. I mean, myself included at times where I'm just, that's just annoying, or that's, leave me alone. And then I realized, like, you know, I think I'm just like holding a lot of anger. And that was something that my husband and I kind of noticed and caught, that we were both irritable and kind of snap at each other. Especially after, I mean, I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was after both losses. And so I think that that's you got to recognize it first off, but then you got to do something about it, which is, okay, I think I'm really pissed. I think I'm really mad about this. And for me, it wasn't instant with the first miscarriage and stillbirth. So with our daughter, my water broke because of incompetent cervix. And, it was devastating. I mean, it was terrible. And it was right when COVID was hitting. So like all the hospitals they very much like, you can only have one visitor. And, I don't think at that point we were doing masks yet. Because again, it was just that it was March. So if you remember what the country was doing last year in March, yeah. So it's like those protocols and things they were just kind of fumbling, that nobody really had a systematic way to deal with COVID yet. So that in of itself was hard, because the hospital here in town did not want to help me, because my doctor was in about an hour away, because I trusted her and I was willing to travel. And of course, that was my first pregnancy, and I had never even heard of incompetent cervix. I didn't even know that could be a complication. So yeah, to say the least, it was terrifying to have my water break. I mean, that was crazy. I think that I'll get into more detail just about that whole ordeal. And I mean, God started speaking immediately when my water broke. Boom. Wouldn't shut up, in a good way. Almost so much so that afterward, as I was grieving, I almost got angry at God, because he wouldn't stop talking through that whole time. So I couldn't deny that he was with me, I couldn't even be like, you didn't talk to me, I didn't hear from you. Like, no, I couldn't deny that God was there. And that in of itself almost just pissed me off right there. I was like, really? You won't even let me have that? Like, I know the truth that, you're with me, but can you just let me have that for a minute so I can, be angry at something? Because the truth is, I think, we want someone to blame. Now, we can blame the enemy. That is why things like miscarriage and pregnancy loss happen. But I mean, it's just funny how things like that can come about. But I was not immediately angry with her. I wasn't. I really accepted it because of what God was speaking to me. It was the Holy Spirit just continually talking to me, really getting my spirit prepared to let her go. And I think because it happened the way it did, anger didn't hit me until way later. Now, that may not be the same for you. With our second loss, so 8 months later, I get pregnant again. Did not expect it to be that quick. And that pregnancy was rough too. We lost who we believed to be our son very early on. So we lost him at 7.5 weeks, but we didn't find out until about 10 weeks. And it was just really hard. I think that was, to me, I think I immediately got mad. So it was very different from pregnancy loss to pregnancy loss, child to child. It was just very different for me. So I can only imagine for you guys that are watching this and that have gone through similar experiences, what it was like for you. So first of all, I want to know, did you feel anger immediately, or was it later, somewhere in between? And was it different if you had multiple miscarriages? And what was it like if you had living children? Because, oh my gosh, I can't imagine also having to take care of, children when you've just lost one. I mean, that's a whole nother struggle too. So I think that's really what I want to hear from you guys, right? So because I'm not like an authority in this area. I'm just sharing what I've experienced in the spiritual revelations that I've gone through. So I definitely want to hear from you guys on that. I think anger in general is something that we as women, there's definitely a message here, at least in the US, that if we get angry, that we're ungrateful, or that we're not Christian enough, or we don't believe in God enough, and like you're not supposed to have that much anger, and like just, and like you get called, the B word and all that stuff. And for me, I think that anger is valid. I mean, my gosh, you just lost your baby. Like, I held my daughter after I gave birth to her, knowing that she was already gone. Yeah, like, it's valid, right? It's valid. But I think also in Christianity, in churches and whatnot, I think we do have this misunderstanding about anger, that we shouldn't confront it or shouldn't deal with it. We should just hide it, shove it down. And you don't want to shove down anger. You really don't, because listen, with any emotion, obviously that's tied to our body, and we're going to store it in our body. And also it's going to come out. It's going to explode. So we have to confront this head on. I think, my gosh, like don't please, like whatever you do, confront that, because it will start seeping out of your pores at some point, because we just can't shove it down. I think somewhere along the way, we get this message where we're not allowed to confront our emotions or feelings. And that really upsets me, because it's just not true. Now, anger is not a lack of faith. Anger is not any of those things. And that's a little bit of what I talked about in the videos this past week. But I do think that there's some kind of something that happens where I don't know where the message is coming from. I really don't. I know it's in the church, but I also know that, and from the spirit of religion, right? I'm not blaming people when I say the church. I just mean, the spirit of religion is alive and well, unfortunately. I believe that that's a demonic stronghold. And it's really it thrives on the checklist of how good you can be and how obedient you can be, and what you can do on your own merit. And that's not like, okay, so obedience to God, absolutely, we need to do that. But there becomes a breaking point between, doing everything that you physically can in obedience and having faith. You have to have both, right? You can't just have works. You have to have faith and works. We're always going to fall short with works. I think that anger is just not an immediate, you don't immediately assume that because you have anger, that means you have unbelief or a lack of faith in God. Because the truth is that, okay, it's rooted in our body, in that human part of us. And if we do not deal with it and give that to God, we can't compartmentalize it. It's going to spread like wildfire. And our body, spirit, soul, mind, it's all connected. You can't compartmentalize any of it. So I think that for whatever reason, we think that about a lot of things. And I mean, shoot, it's not like I haven't thought that at some point or another, like lied to myself, like, oh yeah, like I'm fine or whatever. Man, also, just in general, anger that is not dealt with, that is shoved down, will turn into depression, straight up. Like, you can go look that up or ask a therapist. That's the truth. If you don't deal with that anger, depression, okay? Because there are types of depression you can develop for sure. So we definitely want to deal with that. And it's not something that God is put off by, because it's not like God didn't know. God knows if we're mad. He knows everything about us. So there's not going to be a time where we need to hide that from him, and he wants us to give it to him. I think in our own, maybe we feel shame. Maybe we feel like something's wrong with us. Maybe we feel I should just be grateful to be alive. With our second miscarriage, I got very close to, I got as close to death as I've ever wanted to get. Yeah, I'm all set. Like, I don't want to do that again, because it was an incomplete miscarriage and it was a complete disaster. And so it was like, that was scary in and of itself. And then, I don't know. To me, even just feeling anger about that stuff, and like just like the doctors, and like why are you so incompetent, like why are you, like it's just ridiculous. Anyway, none of that really means a lack of faith. I do think that as we sift through our anger and really all the negative emotions, I do think that we're going to see unbelief, but negative emotions in general, sadness, those sorts of things like anger, all that, it doesn't mean that you immediately have a lack of faith. So let yourself process all of it, because you might see unbelief come out. I had moments where maybe I had doubts, and it wasn't like, so doubt is that middle connecting road between faith and a lack of faith, like fully complete faith to lack of faith or unbelief. Doubt's that middle road. So if you don't deal with the doubt and confront that, that's going to be a seed of unbelief that will then sprout more unbelief. And I think that, as tough as it is, we do have to face all our stuff and give that to God. We actually have to give it to God. We can't just say, oh, I'm in so much pain, God, help me. God, I give this to you. I submit this to you. I'm hurting, God. You draw near to the brokenhearted, and I believe that you're here with me. Take this from me, God, and I receive your healing. We have to give it to God and receive the healing. And, for me personally, I believe it's important to be very specific in your language as you pray about that. And don't be shy with God. Because of Jesus, we can come boldly before God. Come boldly, okay? Ask for those mountains to be moved. Ask for the healing. Continue to seek God. It's so worth it. I know that, man, there are times when, it was incredibly difficult for me to even read the Bible and go back and do that after the first miscarriage, after our daughter. It took me probably a month or two. Like, I just couldn't. And then when I did, it was an immediate, like, tears and just cry, because I know that God's there. But it's just so hard when things like this happen, and we're like, well, why did you let this happen to me? Like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? And, the truth is that we may never know, right? We just may never know why that's happened. And I think that remembering that Psalms 139 says that we were knit together in our mother's womb, and then going into the footnotes, especially of the Passion Translation, which I just love that translation, reminds us that God puts an eternal spirit into that embryo. That's what it says right there. And covers that embryo with angels, defends them. So they immediately go to heaven. That spirit, their spirit is eternal. I really rest in that. But it took me time, through anger, through pain, and all of that, to get to a place and go, oh, they're in heaven. They didn't have to go through any of this crap that I've gone through. But it took time to get there. It wasn't like, you don't just arrive at acceptance. Like, I was there with our daughter. I accepted it. But then I also had to go through time where other things came up. I feel like doubt and some unbelief. And I'm trying to think of some of the doubts that I had. What was it? So I had some doubts. Like, man, are you just not going to heal me? Like, wow, like, you just let that happen. You promised her. You talked to me about her. You told me her name was Jacqueline. Like, you told both of us her middle name was Rose, Jacqueline Rose. You've been talking to me about this baby for years, because God spoke out 4 names, birth order, and said, be wary of miscarriage. Well, okay, be careful of miscarriage. Well, dang, I didn't know you were going to give me 2 miscarriages. I didn't know you were going to take both babies. Like, are you serious? So yeah, I had to work through that. So I definitely, for me, the process of I guess weeding out what's an emotion versus what is unbelief. And what really helped me was to write it down and to have one column where, I said, okay, this is how I'm feeling. And I would just put down, like, I'm just in so much pain. Like, I'm so sad. and it was different with each miscarriage, truthfully. It really was. It was just a different process with each one. So what I felt with each loss was so different. I mean, my gosh, I held my daughter and met her, and she looked perfect. I mean, she looked just like my husband and I mixed together perfectly. I mean, it was incredible. She had my hands, my long, skinny fingers, and she had my toes, and like she had my husband's lips and nose, and like it was incredible to see how God had just perfectly formed her, and to think like, are you serious? I just lost her. Man, if I could, if I had just known what to do better, if I had just, so writing all that down, and like, wow, the true loss of her and not ever getting to have more time. And the truth is that there's never enough time. There's just never enough time. And I knew that, like, you could have given me days, years, like, what, there's never enough time. And I think that's the truthful part of being, a mom, being a parent. You're never going to have enough time. You always want more time. And so that I just had to accept, like, well, I'm thankful for the time that I had with her. Whereas I never got to meet our second child. We never got to meet him. And that was a pain that, like, oh, I don't even know who he is. It's like, and so we did pray to God, who is this child, who is that? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in other videos, but, he had given us his name, which is Ezra. So we did know it was Ezra. And, I don't know. So it's so different. So when you write down those things, at least I did, in one column, and then in the other column, I located what I know to be true. And that's something that God spoke to me as her water broke. It's something that I learned from our pastor. And like he had just spent the year talking about locate what you know to be true about God, especially when your circumstances don't reflect what you believe and what you know to be true. When he's spoken promises, when things are going to come to pass, that you're going to get healing, no matter what. Yeah, so a lot of times our circumstances are not going to reflect it as we're going through it, as we're waiting on God. And that's the enemy's way of trying to throw off our faith or whatnot. And so when you locate what you know to be true, you can stay grounded in that and still experience your emotions where you don't have to shove them down. So I would encourage you to do this. If you're having trouble locating where your unbelief is, really. Do I have unbelief? Do I have a lack of faith? God, show me, point it out to me. Come to God and just say, hey, I want to know, because I think I'm good, but, so write it down. And then on the other side, write down what you know to be true about God, undeniably. Like, what do you know to be true? So that really helped me. What were some things that helped you? Did you locate any unbelief when you had pregnancy loss? Did you, what revelation did you have? That's what I want to hear, because I know the revelations that I've received, yes, I've received some, I've received a lot, but everybody is so different in the revelations that God gives them. So I want to know from you, what was a revelation that God gave to you? Trying to conceive. Whew. Okay. After pregnancy loss, when you're trying to conceive, that is rough. Okay, so when we had our daughter, I was like, okay, no, 3 months, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to be ready to do this. Okay. Because, right, I was still immediately in it. And then after, I was like, you know what? I'm not ready for this. Because if this happens again, even though incompetent cervix, you can get the cerclage, the stitch in the cervix, and you can get progesterone supplements to help thicken and keep the cervix stiff. You can do it at the same time. You can do one or the other, or you can do both. And I opted to do both with the second pregnancy. But, I realized that I really wasn't ready. You have to realize that, and I'm sure a lot of you already know this, pregnancy after miscarriage, there is a whole new spiritual battle that happens. The moment you get pregnant, boom, there it is. fear is going to be a number one factor. Fear is going to come. There is no question. In our church, one of the big things, one of the big revelations that our children have had, the children of the church have had, fear is not allowed. And it doesn't mean you lie to yourself and go, I don't feel fear. I don't feel, don't do that. But it is about confrontation and declaring fear is not allowed. We're not doing this. Fear is not allowed, because guess what? No matter how much fear I give into, no matter how much fear that, I start to feel, or, it's not going to change the outcome of this pregnancy. Like, it's not, I can't control it. So if I'm sitting here going, I don't know, it's not going to change what's going to happen. It's hard to live that out. It is really, really difficult. So I wasn't ready to start really until 8 months later. We really felt like God was nudging us, and I could feel it in my body. Like, I could feel myself starting to mourn the period that I had with her, because I can still remember her smell. I can still remember how she felt in my body. I remember how labor felt. Like, I remember all of it. So I began to mourn that period of time that it was just us. And I guess what I want to say is, you are going to know when you're ready. But until you're ready, if you're trying to rush into it, you really could be rushing into a thing that you don't quite understand yet. Meaning that you could be going into a spiritual battle that you're not prepared for. And this is where we're all different, because some people really are ready 3 months after. They're like, no, I'm good, I'm settled. More power to you. Hey, that's amazing, by the way. For me, I needed more time. I just take longer to process things, I feel. Well, I don't think I take longer. I think I don't know. Maybe I'm thorough. I don't know. But, it was 8 months later for us. And man, it was so intense. It was just trying to fight that fear, addressing it, not lying to myself, lots of scripture, lots of praying to God. And the big thing that God kept saying was, do not fear. And, it was hard. And then losing him was really, really hard in just a completely different way. So I think just be careful about, if you feel yourself rushing through grief, or you feel like you need to rush grief, give yourself as much time as you need, because there's really no timetable, right? So maybe you are ready in 3 months after. Maybe you are. Maybe you're not. I think thinking about, okay, so if I'm pregnant and start thinking about all the things you have to do when you're pregnant and all of that, if you begin to think about those things and you start feeling, I don't know if I can do this, and it's like, just hold on. That might be a sign that you're not ready. And also, my husband and I are really big fans of praying to God about it and asking for him to tell us, hey, I'm gonna let you tell me when I can do this, because I think I'm ready. And then, so that's a big thing for us anyway. I don't know about you, but for us, yeah, we seek God on that. And hey, when are we going to do this? Because God's been very, we serve a God who still speaks. So he's been very clear when we've sought that out. And so we're continuing to seek him on that. So yeah, I encourage you to do the same. So what was it like for you if you have had recurrent pregnancy loss? What was it like for you when you got pregnant again, and hopefully had a healthy baby? I have spoken to many women that have experienced multiple miscarriages because of incompetent cervix and unknown causes, and they went on to have healthy babies. And I think that that's incredible. I've also talked to women who haven't. And I think that it's important to talk with one another and share our stories, especially spiritually, the revelations we get, how we're able to endure and wait on God, and continue to press in, because man, that is so hard. It's so hard. So yeah, I want to hear from you. What was your experience? The last thing I really want to cover and talk about is, I think one that some people do struggle with, that maybe you had a miscarriage because you have a lack of faith. I even battled a little bit when we lost our daughter. I thought, oh, did I not read the Bible enough? Did I not? And see, that's the spirit of religion. That's the spirit of religion trying to come in. Go ahead and just rebuke that, because it's not a punishment from God. Okay, I believe it's in Isaiah. I think it's in Isaiah. I can look it up, where God says that he is not going to punish us anymore. He's not going to do those things anymore. He's not going to cause barrenness. He's not going to do those things. But that's over. And so we have to remember that a lack of faith or anything like that, no, that's not going to cause you a miscarriage, and it's not your fault. I think that also goes back to, hey, this isn't your fault. There's nothing that you could have done. Like, it's over. It's over. And that's part of accepting that, we just don't have control over the things we don't have control of. I do think that for whatever reason, in some of the Christian circles, there's this lie that people want to spread or believe that, that just means that you have a lack of faith. Because, I prayed and I didn't have a miscarriage. And it's like, well, good for you. You understand that doesn't mean anything, right? Like, I'm not saying that your prayers didn't matter and that God didn't answer your prayers. I'm saying you realize that that's not how this works. You can't compare, your life faith walk with somebody else's. And that gets me fired up, because it's like, hey, you don't know who you're supposed to help through this. You don't know how that baby may have even helped future siblings, right, that will go on to be living and thriving here. You don't know. You just don't know. Even if something ended and you have a hysterectomy and you can't physically have babies yourself, my gosh, that's a whole other grieving process right there. But also, it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. That is not true. So just, if you have heard that, just go ahead. No, that is not the truth. You just know right now that's not the truth. And if you have heard that, I'm sorry. I'm just really sorry, because no, you didn't do anything wrong. No. Shut it down. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Also, I want to hear from you. If you have been told that, let me know. Let me know. That's ridiculous. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to get together. Right. So, okay. I did not mean to talk so much. I'm trying to keep these videos down, but man, guys, I really appreciate you coming here and interacting with this. I know that it's really hard to talk about this, and it's not easy. And I think sometimes, we quite frankly just don't want to talk about it. It's hard. Sometimes it is hard to do all, like, the TikToks that I'm doing and whatnot. So, like, just I really appreciate anything you share. If you want to share your faith walk, or how maybe you don't believe anymore, like you're having problems with that, or, I don't think that there's anything wrong to share with that, So I just hope that you feel free to share your story and where you're at with God and what that looks like after miscarriage and pregnancy loss, stillbirth, because it's not always like a pretty journey. You know what I mean? It's not always pretty. And I have found that just being honest with myself and with God about where I am, with my friends, it's like, I feel so much better. Don't fake it till you make it. Don't do that. When people ask how you are and you really are not having a good day, it doesn't mean that you have to be like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Like, if maybe they're not a safe person to talk to, but I just say, like, oh, you know what? It's kind of a rough day. I'm not really want to talk about it, but I appreciate you checking in, and just let it go. Those are really good things to say. It's just not easy. It's not easy. Not everybody understands, especially if they haven't been through it either. So I hope that you find this to be a safe community to join. I will be continuing to share about miscarriage and stillbirth, pregnancy loss in general for the rest of the month. And you can check me out on TikTok. It's A Touch of Flourish on all the platforms. So on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, it's all A Touch of Flourish. If you want to see the videos, I would say do TikTok and Instagram for sure, as well as here, because you're just going to get them directly to you. And check out the blog too, because it's atouchofflourish.com, and it's going to have all of the revelation and experiences that I'm sharing along with the video. So it really puts everything together, and you're not having to search all the different places if you're having a hard time finding it. So if this speaks to you and you are interested in joining this community, feel free to subscribe. I am going to talk about other topics after this month is over, including endometriosis and interstitial cystitis, pelvic floor dysfunction, also just spirituality in general, church hurt. And then also, if you want to see things like the garden house and, our animals and that sort of thing, like what we do, I'm happy to share that with you. And again, I want to hear from you guys. What are your experiences? What are you going through right now? I appreciate you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing with you next week. Take care.